Hello, welcome to another episode of the Great Work Launchpad. My name is Chris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org, and we're at Great Work Launchpad, episode 26. So that's half a year of Great Work Launchpad. So that's pretty cool, pretty good milestone there. Been doing half a year, so let's keep at it. Hey Brandon, hey Derek, how's it going?
Howdy, and congratulations on the milestone.
Thanks. Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like 26. I was like, hey, when's a half a year? Oh, 26. Cool. Yeah, so the Great Work Launchpad is trying to get people launched into doing the great work. And that's what we're here for. We're trying to get people to understand what it takes and what's holding them back, and provide an avenue for anyone who's looking to start, how to start, tips on starting. If you need a place to come on and have a few words, well, this is an avenue for you to come on and you can interact in a more, I guess, informal way, apart from doing like your own presentations or your own audio. You can come say a few words. I was expecting to see Jerry and see if he has his article done there. He could read that. Maybe he'll pop in later. So that's the Great Work Launchpad, and I guess the goal, the intent. And last week we were talking about, or I was making the case for, do you love yourself if you don't know yourself, and if you can love someone if you don't know them. So we were talking about that a lot. And, most people don't know themselves because they don't even know their own behavior or what their behavior represents. So how can you know if you're doing something? How can you know something about you, whether you're good or bad, or you're a moral or immoral person, if you don't even know if your behavior is actually moral or immoral? People just believe whatever they want about themselves. They believe they're good. They believe they do things right. They believe they're moral. And so they don't even know themselves properly. So how much can they actually love themselves if they claim to? And that's what we're talking about in this whole shadow work, is this aspect of, well, especially here now we're talking about fear or love, is this aspect of serving either propensity or force or a disposition or principality, however you want to look at it, within you. How is it exemplified through you? And the whole point of the shadow work, and what's holding people back from doing the great work, is that they don't have enough self-knowledge about themselves. And I remember that was Derek's most important thing in the end slavery 1 minute video with Corey Angel out there. That was yours on self-knowledge. So yeah, self-knowledge. So we're talking about when you don't have the self-care developed, the self-love, which puts you still in some aspect of self-loathing because you're not what I've been calling the alchemical gold. You haven't worked on yourself enough to overcome these fears, these things that are limiting your potential from engaging in that work to try to bring a state of, I guess we call it a state of agape love on the wide scale, because you don't have it within you and it's not motivating you towards that work. And that's why we have the world we have. That's the external world. That's a reflection of our internal world, all of us together. That's the internal world that we have created. And that is because most people, overall, the sum of us, well, they don't have that self-knowledge. They haven't done the work on themselves, and they still have some aspects of self-loathing, self-hatred that are holding them back from actually caring about their condition, because most people don't even know what the condition is. That you have to know what your condition is to know what your work is. And the condition is enslavement, and that's the work, is ending the enslavement. So when you don't even understand that that's your condition, you're not even aware that that's the work that you have to do. So more, again, they don't have knowledge of the external world and their own self-knowledge of how they're contributing to it themselves or allowing it to continue. So one thing I wanted to, before we start, Jerry's here. So, hey, Jerry, how's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
All right, all right. I got the start of a cold today. I caught it from my 2-year-old. I've been wiping his nose and stuff and not washing my hands. So, yeah, now I got the throat. So tomorrow I'll have like the runny nose and crap. So, I was wondering, did you do your homework that you wanted assigned to you? Did you write something on solipsism?
Yeah. So about that, I started it. I have the first draft. I worked on it a little bit just now. I didn't get to finish it, but I have at least something written on the notepad, which I can share or not until it's ready. It's up to you guys.
Well, I guess we can wait till next week, and it'll be more polished, I guess, and ready to read out. All right, good to know. So I was gonna continue a bit from last week's. I had like a few more things to say, I think, but first I wanted to talk about, just a reminder or a restatement of what agape love is. And something I covered before. Understanding this more, I was trying to grasp at it in 2014 when I did my article on Truth is Love. I was looking at the higher will, the higher self, as being like representative of truth, right, good, morality, justice. That's essentially what we're talking about in agape love. It's caring about truth, about what's right, about the good, about justice, about morality, to the point that you care for it so much that you learn, that you become aware that we are not living in that way, that our aggregate way of life, and even as an individual, you're limited by the aggregate you live within, is that our way of life is not aligned with moral truth and right and good and justice. So you become aware of that. That's when you're, I guess, the first level of awakening, when you begin that spiritual journey, that knowledge quest. And then you eventually, even without knowing it, what you're searching for is like, how do we fix the problem, right? And until you find Mark Passio or someone that learned from Mark Passio, you don't have the real answer. And those are the requirements so that we can live that way, in moral truth and right and good and justice, aligned with that. That's what we're looking for. We're aware that things aren't the way they're presented, that things are upside down, they're inverted, satanic. And we're like, okay, well, there's all this evil. How do we end it? How do we stop it? How do we change it? And there's all these false pathways. And then you either figure it out on your own, which I don't think we did until we came across Passio. At least that's the case for me. And we learn the requirements. What are the requirements to live that way? And then you have that personal work yourself to align yourself with those requirements. And part of that is doing the great work. And until you're doing the great work, which is ultimately to end our enslavement And the only way that's going to happen is according to the law of freedom. Aggregate freedom, the level of freedom that is present is based on the level of morality. And as a corollary, the level of enslavement is based on the level of immorality. So the only way that's going to end is to increase the level of morality of people, which will increase the freedom and diminish the enslavement and eventually get rid of it. And the only way that's going to happen is by people aligning with morality, and that requires moral knowledge, the knowledge of moral truth, objective morality. So these are the requirements that once you apophatically take yourself away from doing these behavior, if you are doing them, once you learn what objective morality is, you also have the requirements to align yourself with the goal of explaining it to others. Explaining this dynamic to others of this agape love within us and how we can embody it and live it, to try to create a world that represents that truth, love, good, right, justice. And when we fail to do this, that's not being in agape love. That's letting falsity, wrong, evil, injustice, and immorality to continue to be part of our way of life. To just let it continue. That is not having agape love. That's not the, like you could say you have some of it in some respect, like I was mentioning, because you were driven to learn about the way the world is and you're driven to learn about the requirements, but you're still missing that drive, that care enough to lead you to actually engage in fulfilling those requirements to create that world where we will all be free. So when you're just letting it continue, you're not actually in that higher agape love. And that is being in apathy, ignorance, cowardice, and or laziness, which is all serving fear instead. So someone could care to a point where they're not ignorant of what they have to do, but they could be afraid and cowardice, or they could just be too lazy to do it. So they don't care enough. It's not, that care within them is not strong enough to motivate them to engage in it yet. So I wanted to reiterate that and bring up that angle on it. I'll let you guys say your piece, and if you have anything to add, and we'll continue from there.
I'll jump in. Since we were talking about, love, and you brought up about, self-knowledge, and when you look at man throughout all of his, history, man has always recorded knowledge and, wrote things down and jotted things down, rather in the form of symbols, her depictions, stories, myths, and like all forms of ways to, record history and to preserve and, pass and spread, knowledge. And one of the means, for that was so that others can benefit, from that same knowledge so they can learn and grow. And when we talk about, this moral truth, and how it is some of the most important knowledge for us to, come to learn and understand and also spread, when we were talking about this agape love, that's what we were talking about, is in order for us to better understand ourselves, then we have to understand these moral truths. Then once you understand these moral truths, then are you helping to record and spread this knowledge, back out into the world, just as, all of the other great teachers have before? Because how are others going to better, help themselves without this same, knowledge, if they don't have access to the same knowledge? Because once you become aware of something, then you are put in a position of power in order for you to create change about what you have become alerted on, what you become conscious of. And that's the whole purpose of the knowledge the of the gnosis, of knowing who we are. If you don't have the knowledge of morality, then how can you truly know if you are doing right and wrong, behaviors in reality? So that's what we are trying to inspire to people and constantly keep talking about, and why this knowledge is so important, and especially self knowledge and knowing what you will not do to others because you do not want it done upon to you. So knowledge, once it is applied, is powered. But once we become aware of something, once we become alert of something, once something gets in our presence and we take in information, then that puts us in a position of power to where we can, possibly create some form of change. I'll pass it on.
Powerful, man. Yeah, I wanted to riff off Chris. Well said, Brandon, by the way. Yeah, you were talking about care and that kind of stuff, or the lack of it, right? And yeah, but it boggles my mind with people, like, where's their care to improve, instead of drifting into their mediocre lives and just maintaining the status quo. Where's their drive for more excellence, or being open to improve on their weaknesses, even refine their strengths, and you know what I mean? So as a master builder of oneself, you don't just stay stagnant up in that shit, right? So I think a lot of it goes back to, I mean, like, before people even step out of that mediocrity. We had a cool show on that with the One Great Work Warriors, by the way. People have to break that fear of looking into the mirror, I think, and why is it so awkward for people to, like, be comfortable in their own skin, it seems, and it's breaking down those barriers and being more comfortable outside of this weird comfort zone that people have been kind of conditioned in. And yeah, you're talking a lot about the condition of things, and whether or not people have air conditioning. But it's like, is the government not handing out free shampoo with all their conditioning? What the hell? I'm sure it's full of chemicals and all that. Yeah, it's a little cheeky. But wanted to say something real quick also on love and hate, and how we've spoken about this in your previous episodes, of how those are kind of like, those are on that same frequency. Those are not diametric opposites. Love and hate, it's that love and fear, that's the dichotomy, right? But I saw someone post something on Facebook and stuff, and saying something like, I have no hate in my heart, and instead of hating, I just I care not, to this and that. And I'm just thinking, that teeters on, like, all right, so you see how that can fall into someone being apathetic about something like that, and not engaging in the full spectrum of human emotion. And I respond to something like, well, yeah, I mean, but don't you hate the condition of slavery in the world these days? Like, what's there to love about that? Or what's there to be passive about it, or just let these things happen and not fucking care about it? you know so yeah, don't you hate it that there's not enough love in the world? What the hell? It's like, you can play on this, it's not a big deal, but it's such a 4-letter word, right? Anyways, just like fear or love. But yeah, we all got to rise above, and yeah, like you said, Chris, stay in that frequency of agape, at least. Have love for your fucking self first and foremost, so you can have it to share with others, right? So much love, yo. ¿Cómo estás? ¿Dónde estás?
Hey, Derek, that's awesome. Yeah, it's one of those things that always gets me thinking. The hate part, is it useful? And it makes me think of Conrad's song where he talks about I'm evil to evil. So I think I'll leave it there. As in, hey, you could use it as an energy source perhaps against the dark forces, against immorality. So I can see its usefulness there. And yeah, you made some great points, Chris. So did Brandon. So I'll just talk about myself because I'm a pretty good example of someone that's been lazy. For example, I didn't finish the homework, right? I had a week to get it done. And what happened, right? I kind of waited till today to get started. And that's a pattern I must overcome. I mean, sure, I'm 30 years old, but I still have a fucking long way to go. So I'm working on myself. And the thing is, just get it done and not procrastinate. So, yeah, that's the work I have to do, overcome that fear because, yeah, we need that agape love. And yeah, I'm kind of I'm fired up to get that done, man. So next week it'll be done for sure.
Cool. I'll hold you to it. I don't know what consequences we can apply if you don't do it, but there'll be dire consequences if you don't do it. Right. So, continuing from the last episode, we were talking about what I mentioned at the beginning. You know, how much can you really love yourself? And what most people are looking at is the appearance of who they are, how they view themselves at the surface level, and the shadow work is going deep within into your psyche. And that's just how they also look at other people or things that they love about other people as the surface level of. And you know, this can bring us to the topic of like the superficiality of most relationships. This was also something that I wrote in 2014 was, I think it's titled Relationships Are Mostly Based on What You Don't Say to Others. And the concept I was getting at in that was that people just, they don't want to get to the truth of like their behavior and what they do. And you're mostly only going to talk about someone, not about like where they're failing or where they need improvement. You're only going to be talking about them. Like in most relationships, it's just what you like in common. So it's this commonality. The things that you find in common are going to be what you unite upon. And since most people don't have moral knowledge, obviously you're not uniting on that. So you're not based in true unity. You know, as Passio had it, he later developed like the infographic of you have what is the moral truth, the right, the good, the true up the top, and people have to be connected to that. And then you have a true relationship between the two of them. And so someone can be connected to it and the other person isn't. So then you don't really have a true relationship. So early on, you know, I didn't understand it to that level, but that's what I was getting at. I didn't reread the article, but I remember it. Relationships are based mostly on what people don't say to each other. So you're not going to tell them like you do this wrong or this is how you're not being moral here. There's like so much that people don't say because they're just trying to maintain the relationship. And that was like one of my key things, as I recall, was that people are trying to favor they're so attached to the relationship that they don't want to jeopardize it. And you know, we can all be guilty of that. But in a true relationship, you're going to more focus on just telling people things as they are. And the more you're able to do that with someone, then the more your relationship is based in truth, because you're actually speaking things that are true about, like, could be things that aren't even immoral, things that you don't like they don't do this and you don't like it. Well, then be honest and talk to the person, like, say if you live with them. But there's all this aspect of just focusing on the surface level appearances and the things that we can get along on, this compromise and common ground, and yes, okay. And that's unfortunately the way of life right now. That's how we have to operate for the most part. And if you're really lucky, you can find someone where you don't have to do that. So it could be a romantic partner, it could be a friend, and then you have more of that authentic relationship between each other, because you'll talk about the nitty gritty, dirty stuff, and you're going to help each other in a sense. That's something I wrote in. I had quotes about that in my Truth is Love article, where I forget who's the quote or what the quote is specifically, but it's along the lines of your enemies, appreciate your enemies because they will tell you things that are true that you don't want to hear about yourself, whereas your friends will not do that. They won't tell you things that are true about yourself that you don't want to hear. So even the people who hate you or who are your enemies, they can provide value to you. And this is part of the caring about truth, this agape love, and this idea, this concept of wanting to be right, so that you want to know if you're wrong, so that you can let go of that wrongness, which aligns you more with what's right. It's not just about being right just to be right and be like, ho, look at me, I'm right, and this ego thing. No, it's about that you care about truth and you want to be right, so that you want to know what's wrong so that you can be more aligned with what's right. So you welcome being told things that are wrong. And that takes, a lot of work on yourself to get to that point. And that's a higher consciousness modality. And we need more people to do the work on themselves to get to that point, and things would move a lot quicker towards our goal to ending our enslavement. Because if you imagine if everyone was like that, even if they didn't have knowledge of morality or knowledge of their behavior, or what it actually represented in terms of moral alignment or disharmony, harmony or disharmony, if they were willing to receive information about themselves that contradicted how they viewed themselves, and then they would honestly evaluate it to see if to judge the veracity of the statement, and be able to have the mind that was capable of verifying if it's true or not. And then from there, admit wrong and imagine better, imagine that you can be better, imagine what the possible better is, and then work to alchemically phoenix risen from the ashes, reformulate, transmute yourself into that more idealized version that you can become. And that's what I view as I term it, a higher, truer, realer self is a potential of yourself that you can become relative to where you are now. And I guess you could look at it as you can have an idea of it, and it can be more perfect, but there'll never be a perfect that you'll ever be. It's this idea of continual self-renewal and self-improvement, where once you're, there's a saying where you can't see what's ahead, the next step ahead, until you reach like the step in front of you. You can't see the one afterwards. So like maybe you can envision like a greater ideal potential to be towards, but there could be even a greater transformation waiting for you once you reach that first level, or whatever next level you're at. And once you get there, then you can see what lies beyond it as another thing to work upon. So people are ignorant of what their own behavior is, what it is, what it represents, and it has them keep doing it and keep this system of enslavement going because they're a part of it, and in some cases they can directly contribute it, and in some cases they're indirectly contributing by supporting that way of life, such as government, and it keeps it going. So that ignorance is a killer that is keeping care dead. Care for themselves to not be enslaved and for others to not be enslaved. So they're not caring about other people's enslavement, they're not caring about their own enslavement, because that ignorance is keeping that care that they could have about their own condition. It's keeping it dead because that knowledge isn't even there of what the reality actually is. The truth is not attained within them. So what's sad is like they don't even know that they are a master of themselves, that there is no legitimacy to others being their master. They don't know this. So this is how they don't even know themselves to that point of their own sovereignty. They accept that others are their masters, even though they don't accept it in that terminology, but by the way they live, that is what they accept. And that's what government is. That's when you support government, that's what you're accepting, that others are your master, they're your rulers, and they get to tell you what you can or can't do and punish you accordingly. And, well, that means that you're accepting that you're not a master of yourself. You're accepting that you're not a sovereign. You're accepting that you're a slave. So they don't recognize that they are sovereign, self-governing individuals. And that's why they don't know themselves. And that's why they don't truly love themselves. So someone might say they are sovereign. They can even have that self-knowledge. And you can go through Pascal's work or someone else's work and be like, okay, I understand what a sovereign is, and now I have that self-knowledge. But knowing you are born sovereign in nature is different than living up to it. You can know it, but then are you living that way? So I'm not talking about, that even us who know it, we're not actually living that way because of the condition of the world that prevents us from being able to live that way, from being fully able to exist that way. So I'm not talking about existing in true freedom, which would mean our sovereignty is being respected by all, because we can't do that right now. I'm talking about living up to your birthright by being engaged in ending your own enslavement. So even though we can't fulfill the totality of our sovereignty because it's not being respected by others in the condition that we live in, living up to it would be living up to your birthright of striving to reacquire that potential that can exist as a condition in reality, and trying to actualize that condition, that potential, into reality. And that is to end your own enslavement along with others' enslavement, to end everyone's enslavement. And that's what you're measuring up to, being a sovereign, despite your sovereignty being violated by living oppressed from authority limiting you, limiting your potential. You're not going to be fully actualized as a sovereign, but you're measuring up to being a sovereign. You understand what a sovereign is and you have that self-knowledge, but you have to engage in what a sovereign would do, which is to fight for their sovereignty, to try to reestablish it as a de facto way of life in their lives, as opposed to being like, okay, I understand that I'm born a sovereign and I don't have sovereignty, and you're like, okay, well, I have that self-knowledge and I'm not doing anything with it. Well, then you're not living up to your sovereignty, to your birthright, to your self-ownership. You're just accepting to be enslaved. You're not working against that unnatural condition, that perversion, that inversion. So when you're on the sidelines, which is not doing the great work, then you're accepting to be enslaved. And that's not living up to being a sovereign. That's rejecting your sovereignty by rejecting your responsibility to uphold it. And so it's rejecting your responsibility to uphold it by working to uphold or restore true freedom. So because you're not working to uphold and restore true freedom, then you're not even upholding your own sovereignty and your responsibility to yourself as your own self-governing, self-owned individual. You're just accepting to have that taken from you, that theft of your own self-ownership in the condition we live in, and you're accepting to continue to live that way. I'll pass it around again. If anyone wants to add to that.
The condition, her apathetic mind, is what came to my mind when he was talking about, everything that you were talking about. And of course, being the condition of fear, because people don't want to step into true love and, true knowledge, true care, true agape, right action. It's like you can't get to that state, you can't get to that condition without the demoralization of the individual, without the demoralization of one's consciousness. Because when you go through that demoralization stage, it's almost like you start to weed out that humanity within them, that ability to care, that ability to feel, and therefore, birth in that apathetic environment, that apathetic, conditioning to flourish. And sadly, that's what we still see. And that's the whole point of what, Chris is talking about with the importance of the self-knowledge. It's there to help you start to peel back those layers, peel back those layers to the self, pull back those layers to that internal onion, so you can understand, how your traumas, look at, how your behaviors, look at how you were brought up, and go within yourself so you can better understand how you behave, better understand how you respond to things, better understand, how you react to things, better understand what motivates you, better understand what turns you on, what turns you off, like all of those things, all of those aspects, because there's always going to be more and more information, hell, that's going to be coming in. So, the demoralized mind isn't interested in learning. The demoralized mind isn't interested in the truth. And that's the conditioning that we have to break. And that's why we have to come to the realization of the knowledge of objective morality, so we can expunge, get rid of this demoralized conditioning that seems to be plaguing humanity, that people seem to love, that seems to be enslaving all of us. Because again, once man becomes so demoralized, then he becomes enslaved. So, you can't get to enslavement without keeping people in that state of ignorance, keeping people in a state of fear, and keep them in that state of demoralization.
Yeah, and people can quite easily enslave themselves, and it could be as easy as limiting their actions based on the fears of what other people are gonna think about them, just based off what they might think about them, not potential actions or other types of consequences. So whether the consequences be good or bad, right? It's all about how the intention is aligned to the action and all that, I suppose. But yeah, Chris, you were mentioning about how, yeah, sometimes our enemies or adversaries would speak about us in ways that we don't always get to hear. It might not always be the proper type of constructive criticism, but there can be an earful of things to possibly consider, and just look in the mirror and see how that matches up with your true authentic self in a sense. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of a shame we don't get enough constructive criticism from our friends who tend to be yes men and women, it seems, and don't want to ruffle the feathers or, rock the boat with, all this stuff, even though, I remember having circles of friends and, like understanding like one particular individual is, kind of just not really on par with themselves and just with the group and stuff. And so intervention time or things like that, you know what I mean? So I was fortunate to be in a group of friends that would we would hold each other accountable and stuff. And like, why do you think of that shit? What are you talking about? Like all that stuff that doesn't make sense, so it was cool growing up and like being able to verbally joust a little bit and just feel the intellectual limitations and room for growth and all that, it seems. But yeah, and with my new partner now, it's kind of the same. We want to be the best versions of ourselves. Like this woman has no fear. She's like, yeah, tell me if you see something that we could do better, things around the house or whatever. She's not. And that's the thing, like people are too caught up on their ego attachments to things that, they fear the change of them or something like that, even if it's going to be for the better, right? Again, like stuck in those comfort zones sometimes, are they really that comfortable, guys? Like, so yeah, are you being sovereign when you're not, you know, living up to your full potential and you're limiting yourself based off of what fear of, you know what I mean? So, um, that and also, yeah, going back to the whole, hate and that kind of stuff, righteous indignation that needs to be alchemized and channeled properly. It is a force to be reckoned with, but it has to be uh, the fire needs to be properly tempered, if you will, for it to be properly effective. What's your desired effect, anyways, right? Chris, ¿qué onda, güey? I mean, Jerry, so yeah.
Yeah, you made some great points there, Derek. And my mind's still thinking about that. I have to catch the replay because that was awesome. But yeah, my mind has just been going in many different directions. And I kind of want to read a little bit of what I wrote, maybe just a little sample, or should I just hold off until next week? It's up to you, Chris.
What's up?
Go for it, man.
Oh, Chris, your mic cut out for me, but
Oh, whoops, sorry. I thought I unmuted it, but it stayed muted. I was saying you wanted to wait. You said it wasn't done, so it wasn't finished. So I was like, well, wait till it's finished, and then you'll have it say what you want it to say. But if you want to read a part, I'd say go for it. If you feel confident about whatever part you did, then sure.
Yeah, you fired me up, Chris. So I kind of want to read.
Yeah, go for it.
What I got, because I've heard episode 1 probably 5 times by now, and this just caught my attention, and I think it's a really good point. So I made about 3 points. First has to do with, let's see what I wrote here. Yeah, let me just go ahead and read it, okay? Here we go. After listening to What on Earth is Happening podcast number 1, there were a few things that caught my attention. The first was Mark saying, we are controlled with words more than any other methodology, believe it or not. He also mentioned that he will get into the meaning of words. Then he said to do a word association game by asking people the first word that comes to their mind after hearing the word occult. He claims 9 times out of 10, the word you will hear back is evil, and that's due to the mind control implied by the social engineers. If you can have someone believe that a word means something other than it is intended to mean, you control their mind and dissuade them from looking into what has actually been occulted or the truth. The word occult simply means hidden or hidden knowledge. From Latin occultus, hidden, concealed, secret. Past participle of oculare, cover, over, conceal. From assimilated form of ob, over, plus a verb related to celere, to hide. From pyru, hell, to cover, conceal, save. When we talk about the occult, we're talking about hidden knowledge. Knowledge that isn't good or evil, it's neutral. It's only knowledge and it can be used for good or evil purposes. And then I go into talking about something else, but before I get into that, I did make some notes because I re-listened to the One Great Work Warriors etymology episode, and they had to do with being clear with words, understanding the etymology of the words, and here's what I wrote. If words don't have meaning, they can be relativistic, and that has to do with moral relativity. And I want to say I was inspired by Brendan to write that. Also, the incorrect definitions of words leads to belief. That's what Brandon said. Because the incorrect definition of words lead to thoughts, and then the thoughts lead to the belief. And also wrote here that obfuscation is at play. And then Derek said a quote by Manly P. Hall, which I think is that words are like, uh, I didn't write the whole quote, but essentially what I did write was that if people don't understand the meaning of words, that misunderstandings are inevitable. So I'll leave it there.
Cool. Well, I look forward to seeing how you tie in occult with solipsism. See where you're going with that. And yeah, we'll hear that next week, hopefully. Do your homework. Yeah, Brandon mentioned demoralization, so I want to touch a bit on that. So demoralization, I didn't go look into it, but when we think of being demoralized, that's when you're like, you don't want to do something. You're like, you think it might be hopeless, and that ties into learned hopelessness of people who can even come across this information, and because they're so demoralized, they're like, oh, well, what can I do? I'm just little old me. And this ties into being devalued, and your self-worth is diminished. And again, we're tying it back. Well, this is a lack of self-respect, a lack of self-love, a lack of self-care. And that's what the demoralization does. Is we've talked about this, I think, earlier in the Great Work Launchpad, where we are made to accept being enslaved, of having masters, rulers, or archons, hence the term anarchy, no archons, no masters or rulers. We're made to accept our enslavement and to have masters and rulers over us. And this is the main way that we are demoralized in an unconscious, subconscious capacity, where we're demoralized by accepting the way society is, and that it must be this way in some cases, that it can't be any other way. And this also lends to the mind control. The perfect mind control is the death of imagination, as Mark Passio put it, something along those lines. So if you accept that something is this way and it can't be changed, not only is that false, but it locks you into probably even imagining in a different way it can be. So if you're not even going to think of a different way it can be, then you're certainly not going to strive towards it, and then you're going to be locked in that condition the way it is, or let other people change it. And that's the world we mostly have, is that people are trying to change it in a bunch of different ways, but they're not changing it in the way that matters, which is evolving our consciousness towards moral alignment so that we can eventually get rid of this government, this self-imposed enslavement that we have upon ourselves. So we're demoralized by accepting the way society is, and to accept to not work fighting to change it at a root causal level. And this is all these other solutions. Oh, this crypto, that crypto, this, Brandon last week? He said, Daddy come home, or it was the week before that. I forget what it was. So Trump.
Oh, with Trump and the whole COVID stuff, and her daddy came home. Yeah.
And then we got, the Jesus, the Savior. So whatever people have as solutions, reform this, do this. If you're not talking about morality, you don't have the actual solution. And that's what I mean by at the root causal true level for working or fighting to change it. And that's one way that we are demoralized, is accept it and you're not going to do anything about it. So it's like, I think I mentioned it in my Funnel 4 presentation, and it comes from Passio, that if you accept that the condition of the world can't be changed, then you've accepted to live in hell. Because that's how he termed it, that hell is like where nothing can be changed and you're eternally stuck living that way, which isn't true, apart from the laws of nature, which are eternal truths, but pretty much, we'll say pretty much everything else can be changed regarding our condition within acceptable limits. We're not going to become rabbits, talking rabbits or something there. So I just mentioned ridiculous things like that. Not everything is possible, but most of it is. That we're not stuck the way we are. So this is the main way that we're demoralized, is just in the way that society conditions us, and then we perpetuate that condition of society. And people are locked in this way, this learned helplessness, this death of imagination, this fait accompli of mind control. So I wanted to mention that. It was a good point Brendan brought up about demoralization. And what I talked about earlier, not doing the great work is not doing the requirements to be free. And that means you're accepting to be a slave and thus rejecting sovereignty, your own self-ownership. If you're not doing that work, all the people that know this, all the people who've been through Passio's work and everything and over the years, and they haven't gone into their true sovereignty, into the capacity they can to live up to it, to measure up to it, well, you're rejecting your sovereignty as a result, because you're not, you don't have it, but you're not doing the requirements to actually get it back in its full force and its full potential. So you're not living up to that potential, even though it's diminished and you can't fully get it back right now. There's that potential to live up to the requirements to get it back, which is to do the great work. And sovereignty means you are not a slave. You're above reign and above rulership. So not doing the great work is rejecting your own sovereignty by accepting your enslavement. So that's just what it is, even etymologically by definition. If you're not doing the work to reject that false claim of ownership, is rejecting your own sovereignty, because you're not living up to the maximization of trying to get that sovereignty respected, by getting everyone's sovereignty respected. So you're born sovereign, but you're also born into having your sovereignty denied or restricted, and that restriction is based on the ignorance of others. That's another small phrase I love by Passio, is that we are bound by the ignorance of others. So our potential for freedom is bound by the ignorance of others, and their ignorance is what is keeping us down. Hence, the whole purpose of the great work, the ultimate, the penultimate goal is moral education. That's the highest level that you can engage in the great work, because the ignorance of others is what's keeping us all in these chains. And the only way to get them out of that ignorance is for them to receive that gift of moral knowledge so that they can self-actualize it within themselves and also engage in that snowball effect of doing the great work to free themselves and free everybody. So we're bound to the ignorance of others. That prevents us from truly living as sovereigns. And we will remain bound to their ignorance until we get up off our asses and influence others, which is to do it most effectively. Not just get off your ass and go outside and go talk to some people and argue with people. No, it's to do it the most effectively by creating content online that gets people to do that shadow work, that inner work, that self-reflection, that introspection, and gain the self-knowledge, that self-respect, that self-care, that self-love, to develop that. Gain the self-knowledge about their current state of being and the state of the world that's a reflection of that, and wanting to change it to that positive side of aligning with objective morality. So other people need to come out of their state of self-loathing, of accepting their own enslavement and that of others. And that's what we're trying to do in the great work. That ultimate goal of self-knowledge, of moral education, is to get people to recognize their own condition of enslavement and to care about it so they get out of that self-loathing of accepting their own enslavement. And that's the arduous task of the great work, to fulfill the requirements of creating true freedom. Pass it to you guys, and we'll wrap up with a final round, whatever you got to say.
It's sad because when you try to give individuals that gift of moral knowledge, they take it as upon you just put coal in their stocking. Sorry, I had to put on like the little lame holiday joke, but yeah, that ain't the stocking stuffer that most people want. They don't want to hear nothing when it comes to moral truths or moral philosophies. Like how dare you be that individual to start talking about, morality. But
how dare you think you even know what morality is, you arrogant
right.
prick. My God.
Yeah. We just have to be like the Grinch, and just keep speaking, keep using that willpower, keep using that care, and keep using that agape love, and keep speaking that voice, that message, because you're going to get so much resistance. And like Chris just said, there's going to be some people, who are going to come at you and be like, who are you to even think that you can even know, about what true morality is? So, you just got to be willing to endure all the bullshit, all the BS that's going to come your way when it comes to trying to morally educate people, because people are going to fight, they're going to kick, they're going to scream. But at the end of the day, deep down, subconsciously, rather unconsciously, they know that what we say is true when it comes to, morality. And that's why they don't want to know, and they don't want to do this work, because they don't want to hold themselves accountable and to that level of responsibility.
Responsibility? Are you kidding me? Jesus, it's funny because people want to be adults, but fall short of acting like one and all this stuff. And a lot of people are still up in spiritual kindergarten, despite their Facebook statuses and whatever the fuck they want to postulate on social media. can y'all please just break the fear of accepting whatever's going to come your way by being authentic? That's what being sovereign is. Part of it is being your authentic self, unwaveringly so, but also growing in more of yourself and refining what it means to be yourself. As I mentioned, tapping into your potential. We have so much potential, as individuals and as a collective. Like, just hanging out with some folks in and around network, combining forces, that is so fucking powerful. And I encourage anyone out there to try to link up with folks that you've been, having these like-minded, connections and conversations with on the internet. Let's get some shit cracking in real life, please. We need more of that. And yeah, what are you afraid of, right? There's so much positive benefits that could come about these things that we can't really see in our mind, because I think Chris or Brandon, you were saying that we're not always able to see the next step ahead of us yet. Be brave, have some courage with you. Take that courage with your step. How's that spiritual pep in your step also, by the way? We're not supposed to be just learning about these things just to talk about them. You're supposed to apply them to your lives and be empowered and use that to inspire others as well. Launchpad, mother lovers, shit. With that, Jerry.
Yeah, I love your talks, Derek, and it's awesome that you're in a relationship now. And let's see here what I wrote. Yeah, I wrote down leading by example is probably the best influence. It's the best way to influence others. And you guys are doing a great job at that. And I'll stand on the shoulder of giants. And just talking about the consequences, Chris, from what you previously said, that, there has to be some consequences. I feel it's a cut to the soul, right? It's like, so I know I have to get that done, the homework. And so I also ask myself, how do I get out of self-loathing, right? And I think the answer is hard work. And as you mentioned, Derek, just now, what are you scared of, right? I've been listening to this book, and the author says, you just have to do it, man. You just have to do whatever you're scared of, and that's how you get through the fear. And I also just want to mention the word endure, very synchronistic, because I'm actually listening to that book now. And it is about endurance, so keep at it.
Yeah, just start, fail, fumble, screw up, but then you learn from that, and then you keep going and getting better. And if you're afraid to do that, well, that's the limitation. That's fear holding you back. Yeah, you gotta just start somewhere, do something, learn as you go. Otherwise, you'll never start. If you're like, you don't know what to do, well, that's how you learn to do, is to try. And when you try and you fail, you learn how not to do. That's what I tell my son. Sometimes he doesn't want to try things. I'm like, it's okay. You try, you fail, and you learn. You learn how not to do it, and then you try a different way. And then you learn how not to do it again, and then eventually you'll get to the right way to do it. So it's okay to fail. You just keep going at it. And yeah, I'll play this. What I played, I managed. So I got this complicated setup now. I got this Voicemeeter banana thing with like all these virtual inputs and outputs, and it's like confusing. Anyways, I got like my VLC player going into an auxiliary input that goes into like a B channel into Voicemeeter banana with my mic. Anyways, You guys should be able to hear this. So let me know if you hear this. And this will inspire you, Jerry. Inspiration right here coming up. All right.
How about trying to get out there and do the actual great work so this world isn't such a fucking hellhole, huh?
Yeah, what do you think about that?
How about trying to get out there and do the actual great work so this world isn't such a fucking hellhole, huh?
Yeah.
Oh man,
That's
fucking
that's
great.
an awesome quote by Passio. It's like, it's great. I love it. I'm gonna end every
Yeah.
episode with that from now on. That's like motivation. That's this. See that fire coming out of that rocket? That's the great work seal. Truth, love, freedom. Well, that's what this is. Listen to it again. That's what that is.
How about trying to get out there and do the actual great work so this world isn't such a fucking hellhole, huh?
Right, that's the fire that a lot of people need. Is you need to be told to do it harshly. I find it hilarious, but
That
it's
natural
awesome.
law, alchemical process, slide, that's fire. That starts everything off.
That's the fire right there, man.
Yep.
Light a fire under your ass. That's what Passio is known for. That's what I told him in like 2014 when I made my site. That's the only email I ever sent him was, here's my site. I finally kicked myself in the ass and started my site. I said something like that. It's finally kicked myself in the ass. And yeah. So that's the whole point. Is you got to hear. That's what Passio's good for. You can tell you shit that's true that you might not want to hear, but because it's true and you realize it, then you're like, fuck yeah, I got to do this. Motivates you to get your ass in gear and light a fire under your ass. So that'll be the ending soundboard every episode. I just got to remember to do my crazy voice meter banana setup and have everything else. It won't work for you guys.
Or you'll hear him and then you'll be a weak little crying bitch because you can't take the hardcore meat that's being fed to you. So yeah, you'll scream like a little baby child, like a little pussy.
Yeah, some people can't handle it and they're like, no, that's mean. No, I don't like the truth. That's not true. Screw you, Passio.
Yeah. They're worried about him screaming and not if he's saying something that's true.
Yeah. So do the work on yourself. Do the shadow work. Get aligned. Align with objective morality. And then you can teach it. Don't be a hypocrite. And yeah, there we go. That's how we'll end it. Hopefully, well, thanks for everyone for coming by. Maybe see you next week. If my child gives birth, then you won't be seeing me, but should be like maybe 2 weeks to go. But you never know. So it could happen. But if everything goes well, or if everything is delayed, or anyways, I don't know how to phrase that. But maybe see you next week. Maybe not. If not, another time.
Yeah. If not, then we know where you are. So
yeah, I'll be back in like a month or something like that there. So have a good evening. Thanks everyone for coming by. Take care. Peace.
Thank you.